All right, good evening. Pastor made the mistake of telling me to jump right in, so that's what I'm going to do. I'd like for just a minute, just to kind of set the stage just a little bit, and before we do so, if Bob Meyer could lead us before the throne of grace, I would surely appreciate that.
Father, we do thank you for what we do together tonight. For your word, encouraged by your work around the world.
Thank you, sir. I would like for you for just a minute to think, if you can do this. It's a challenge, okay? So imagine your life or lives without, say, Bob Jones University. Let's say it doesn't exist. It's not there. You have no access to such a thing. And let's say that there's no OBF, there's no fellowship of churches. Not there. Okay? And let's say that any deep teaching you're going to get may come by once a year for maybe a week, and if you can afford to follow, 2 weeks out of the year. So you would have Pastor Hamilton and Pastor Smith once a year for 2 weeks. Okay, that's unimaginable. You can't do that, can you? I can't either, but that's what I see. So that's kind of what we're working with in Africa and what we're trying to build. So I want you to try to imagine that, because I think that you might have the question of why is progress so slow? And that's one of the reasons. And the other reason is how these folks live. And for a couple of weeks, I get to live like they do. I'm not sure I'd want to live like that all the time. I'm not sure I could do that. Believe me, flipping lights on, having instant water, having power, having all of these commodities are taken for granted by us. Transportation. How many would be here this evening if you had to walk to church? Or even take public transportation? So that's the situation these folks are in all the time, and they have to live that way. They're bound by the conditions that they have. Now, I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying you have to realize the reality of how and where they live. We're very, very blessed where we are, even with the things that are presently going on we might not like. But we're still far well off. And you have Bible teachers like Pastor Hamilton and Pastor Smith and the visiting folks that come, and it just is. It's just how we live here, right? And you have access to material. What would happen to Pastor Hamilton if he didn't have his library? And available material to study. So these are some of the hurdles that we're dealing with on a constant basis. So I want to let you know that, not that this is going to be a negative report. Frankly, it was a whole lot more than we had planned. And let me preface that for just a minute. Because of what happened the tour before, we had a really hard time, if you remember, the tour before. And basically that was kind of a nightmarish administrative tour. But God worked it out that we could be in Uganda for 4 weeks instead of the 2 weeks we had planned. And that worked out well, and that's what was needed. And so we're always saying, not our tour, it's God's tour. And God's way is always the better one. The goals were very narrow when we started. So the idea in this tour was I didn't want to get too ambitious. What I wanted to do was get a hold of our young people and get them back on track after the pandemic. And then also to form teams, because my front line was gone. So Daniel was deceased, and he did all of the coordinating and translating. So in Uganda, or in Swaziland, I didn't have my translator and my coordinator. In Uganda, Obadiah is dying, so that's a little bit of a problem. And Pastor Tinua is now out of the ministry, and so those were our two heads there. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, Dr. Karume had suffered COVID, and he had eye trouble and still does, and was down for 4 weeks, and they fired him from his job. So that was the situation that we were flying into. So I felt that to be too ambitious would be overwhelming, and it would be a mistake to overwhelm these folks. So I wanted just get two things done, and that was to take our young people, get them reinvested back in our program, and then to form teams for the future. That was done, but again, God had his way. And so a lot more happened than that. So I wanted to preface this report with that so that you would understand the things that happened and really how miraculous this really was. So I'm going to start off with this picture, and I'd like to, I have a guy that I teach. His name's Orlando. I've asked prayer for the Orlando family in Grove City. He's an artist by trade, and I wanted to somehow picture the fruit of the Spirit versus the lust of the flesh. I wanted to answer the question of our young people: how do we live in a world like this today as believers? And so I chose the book of, I felt led to choose the section of Galatians chapter 5:16 through 6:10, and the application of you reap whatever you sow. And God's promises are true both ways. If a man sows to the flesh, he's going to reap what? Corruption. If he sows to the Spirit, he reaps. And God doesn't lie. So it's very clear. And we're going to sow to one or the other all the time. So he is trying to picture that. And so this is what he thought the fruit of the Spirit would be best illustrated as. And then we have, throughout that outline, we have, of course, walk in the Spirit. That section in chapter 5 begins and ends with that statement. If we walk in the Spirit, let us live in the Spirit. Walk in the Spirit, you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So this is quite pictorial. Just understand his background. He was a Catholic, devout Catholic, altar boy, and in a Catholic church that actually served the mafia. So he's a little dark, and I'm warning you for the next picture that's coming. Okay, so this is the warring between the Holy Spirit and the flesh. That's what this is to depict. And then, of course, this is sowing. And so he illustrated that, and the kids loved it. They just loved these pictures. And to be able to have both verbal and picture and be able to view, I think is a real help to us. Now, this is what I was warning you about. Pretty dark. I don't think you'll want to do anything with this guy, right? So this is his illustration of the lust of the flesh. So that is a ministry that does help us. I think that it does help to illustrate, and then we appeal to all areas of learning, auditory and visual and so forth. All right, we began in Eswatini, and we formed a new team. Pastor James Manissi, if you look in your papers that you have in front of you, and Saki Gambuli is Daniel Gambuli's middle daughter. Timbenkothi Vilakati is a young man that I've known since knee high. The Villicati family is one of the beginning families of the church there. And now we have the second generation coming up. And not only could he translate, he could drive a little, and that was good for us. We put a lot of kilometers on the vehicle this year. Miss Villicati is exactly in the middle in the red dress, just so that you can get to know her. This is the core of the young people that we're dealing with, that later James would be teaching. We had James come in for 5 days and go to some of the churches with us. They know him as the camp director, and that's really James' wheelhouse when it comes to teens. And it's amazing how he's able to talk with them and work with them. And I've learned that Africans can teach Africans better than we can, regardless of the different cultures and so forth. And so to have him around and leading in those sessions was a big plus. This is the church now. It's progressing. They keep making it better. It's an interesting place. It's right out in the middle of nowhere. But it is truly a lighthouse and a testimony in that area. So some of this is the Sunday school. The lady that's standing in front here is Mrs. McCanya. She is the Sunday school teacher. Remember when we sent the books and Bibles over and the Schofield pamphlets, notebooks, Bible cover. This is someone that would have those, and we had the opportunity to assist her in learning how to use them with the annotation index at the back of the Schofield Bible, and then fill out what's represented in that teaching. Okay, that's Pastor James Manissi. He is the pastor at Mvimbili. Welcome back to Christ Bible Church. And this is the fellow we worked with in the camps who did the interpretation and translation. He's now part of our team there. This is just a picture of the church. Tim is in the white t-shirt with jean jacket there in the middle, sort of off to the left. That's a good picture of Tim. This is kind of a pan pick of the next two of the teens that we met with that Sunday afternoon. Here, the pastor is translating for me. That's the second half of the group of young people there. So continue to pray for the teen outreach. There's a real movement with the youth in Africa. They are interested, sharply so. And so I look at them as the future church in Africa. They need to be indoctrinated. They need to understand the practicalities and the character of living. And those are the three areas that we're working on together. Okay, let's see if we can. Okay, in case you're guessing, the big white ugly guy there in the middle is me. But this is the family that has begun with us from the very start. And just continue to pray for them. They were with Daniel from day one, so they've been with us with that church for about 30 years. Her name is Mrs. Graybu. It's the Graybu family. So just continue to pray for them, and they've always been a joy to minister to, always faithful, and they're interested in the faith being passed down to their family and extended family. Okay, so we move to our next location, and it's Louvet. Louvet is kind of between the airport and Mvimbili, about 2 hours out. What happened was the corrugated iron blew off of their church walls, so we're out in the open. And for us at that temperature, it's short sleeves, but for them, as you can see, they've got they're girded up pretty good there. Very cold for them, and I was delightfully surprised at the turnout under those conditions. That's another circumstance you have to think about and realize when you're in Africa. So to have a cement floor is a luxury. But it's poles and it's corrugated iron, and that's your roof and that's your walls. So that's what you come to when you come to church there. But continue to pray for them. Now in the middle here, see if I can do this right. Bob tried to train me. Okay, that's Pastor Lukinji from Uganda. That's James. So as I said, he was with us, came over for about 5 days or so, and he went to these different churches with us. That's just the same place. All right, we always do home visits when we're in each area. We want to go see the core members of the church, try to meet needs. We had some sad stories, and I think I even wrote Pastor about his opinion, but the business of quitting in result of the pandemic, pastors quitting, and then just like a careless life after. And it's very disturbing to these folks, and I really didn't have an answer for that other than must not have been of the truth. But for them, culturally, that's very difficult. So that was something that came up in our home visits there in Louvet. This is Tunja. This is another church that was started with the evangelistic team that Daniel had. These are obviously the children. And that was a surprise to us because my team wasn't ready for this. Remember, we wanted the youth, and then we wanted the leadership, but word got around, and school was out. So we're the thing in town now, so to speak. And so immediately, James and Daniel's daughter had to teach the children, and then we worked with the teens after, and there was adults inside that who wanted to hear the Word of God. So you don't send them home and say, well, no, we're not here for you. You know, you can't do something like that. So we began to kind of expand what our scope was to meet the need. This is Lavalamante. Lavamante's kind of on the other side of Swaziland. We had to cut our pictures down. I couldn't show you everything in every place or we'll be here forever. But again, we drove up, and here's the adults over here, and here's the children over here, and here's the teens over here. And so we had to split up and immediately teach. And it really challenged. What do you want me to do? Fix it. Like that? Okay. So this is kind of an aftermath of the adults and the teens. I don't know how to do that.
Turn around and look at your picture.
Okay.
So you're still there.
Okay.
Go back to that one on here. Should be right there, isn't it?
No.
I can't see out of glasses.
Yeah, that's right. That would be here.
Why are we locked?
I don't know. Don,
Okay, try it now. Try it.
do I? Do we have one screen good? No?
Hey,
It's not. Okay. So they can't see it.
all I see is that one picture.
Okay, I warned these guys, TED plus IT is trouble. So,
Let's do something drastic.
okay, go ahead.
All right, go back in. Oh, it's still locked.
It's your system.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead, go back in.
All right, what if we go to album? Oh man, it's going all over the place.
I'm gonna do something real drastic. It's the system, it's not you, it's them.
Okay. Yeah, how do we go back to album? Now what?
Oh, wait, no, I got it. There, you got it. Go back to your visiting screens. Yep, you got it.
Okay. Okay. Thank God for Bob. All right. As I said, this is La Valamonte, and this is the aftermath of the teaching there. So this would be the adults and teens combined. And again, it's you can see the interest. These people had to leave their shops and businesses in the middle of the day to be there. And there's a very sincere interest. This young man with the big smile in front, he's our team leader there, and always excited to have us there, looks forward to the word and looks forward to the teaching. Okay. All right, so now we're on the other side of Swaziland. This is Pastor Mabuza on the left, Pastor Magangu on the right. That's Daniel's daughter in the middle. What we did is we didn't realize the interest that would be at those churches, so we were in one church for the early morning service, and then in the other church in the afternoon, and then taught the teens combined after that. So it gave us a good opportunity. Daniel really discipled these guys along. Pastor Magangu's been in major Bible themes and is teaching that to his church, and so we were happy to hear and see that progress. They would like to have, there's a rift between the pastors, so we're trying to deal with that. One set of pastors against another. There's offenses, and unfortunately the offenses are true offenses. That makes that hard. So we're having to minister to both sides realizing that. And what's interesting is usually when you go somewhere, the pastors are telling you to straighten out the young people. But here, the young people are asking if we could straighten out the pastors. And so we're not there to straighten them out. We're there to work with the young people. The young people want the truth. They want to have these camps and rallies. They want to know the Word of God. And the pastors on both sides are at least reverencing and respecting that. However, both sets of pastors realize, hey, we need Bible. We need to be taught the Bible. So what has happened is through our camp, the kids are coming home and they are telling what they've learned, and it's kind of putting the pastors in an awkward position. So that isn't what we planned to have happen, but it has happened. And so therefore, we're able then to introduce the deeper doctrine and truth in that way. So this is Pastor Magangu's church, and as I said, we had the Sunday school time with him. This is his wife there in the center in the white sweater. Don't look for Africans to be on time early. There's no early. So there's no time. They get there when they get there. But it was the best we could do while we were there. And it being last minute didn't help any. But I'm very happy to have met the core group at that church. He insisted on a picture, so picture you could kind of see our 4x4 we use. That lady has given us that at a 60% discount for 20-some years. And so without that, boy, it'd really get expensive. And she is a believer. Her name is Gladness, and but I have to be sure to give her a report, or I'm in trouble. So, but that's always been a blessing. God knows how to send the right person in the right place at the right time to get the job done. So that's another blessing. This is Pastor Mabuza's church. As I said, we had the service there in the afternoon. They're about 20 minutes apart. That's my best side. But then we were able to combine. Tim Bikosi took the vehicle, got the young people from Magangu's church, brought them over to Mabuza's church, and so we were able to have kind of a little rally there in the afternoon with the young people. So just continue to please pray for that interest. These are missionaries that we support. They know the Walls personally. And this is Robert and Esther Marsh. They're in South Africa. Their daughter has just been accepted as a missionary through IFM, and we've been supporting them for some time. You can see the brace on Robert. He has bone cancer, And he has really struggled, but never once did he think about leaving the ministry. Never crossed his mind. So he's fighting the effects of the medicine and the bone cancer, and is presently taking his responsibilities a little at a time. I'm very impressed with that man. And then I told him, you realize what you've done. You've taken the excuses away from all of us. Well, we don't have any excuses about being tired or can't do it. So, but I wanted to encourage them personally. And I was very happy to be with them. We also have the Brunk family, Caturis Bible Church. That's a combination of 3 different townships names, and I can't pronounce them still. But they put that into one word, and it's a Bible church. And finally, they have come to the point where they now have their own building. And it was pretty neat to see that after many years of working. Township ministry is, oh boy, that's an altogether different tank. Different cultures, different languages, very, very strict boundaries. You're in somebody else's township, you better have a real good reason for being there. And in South Africa, due to the apartheid years, that hasn't quite faded away yet. But yet here's this church with all the cultures, all the languages, meeting in the name of Christ. Amazing. You won't find that anywhere else, any other reason. These people would never be together for any other reason. And so it's an amazing thing to see them worship together and to work together in a church like that. So just continue to pray about that. This was the benefit for my church at home. They're actually next door neighbors. So the Marshes are on the right, the Brunks are on the left, and it's kind of fun to be there with them. This is the church that was started by Mark Grings years ago. So we now go to Uganda, and when we were planning this, James says, you're going to need to make a pit stop somewhere else. And I said, well, we really don't have time for that. Well, Pastor, there's a new church started. And I said, well, it would have been nice to know. They said, I didn't know it either till now. So 2 guys went out from Kamunkuli, Truth Bible Church. They began to evangelize in this area. There were no churches around, and they wanted to meet to worship on Sundays. And you say, well, that's not the conventional way to start a church. Yeah, you're right. But again, there's nothing there. Now, I know that's hard for us to imagine, because when you drive through Westerville, oh my goodness, there's churches every place. Or Columbus even, but not there. So it's quite a challenge when things are done this way, but that's the need. I truly believe that in Africa there is a revival. Now, I've seen it up front. These people couldn't be more sincere. The very high zeal to be there to hear the Word of God. So first we went early, began with the leadership, and I think I wrote emails about this, and we looked in the book of 1st and 2nd Timothy, John 7, concerning doctrine and truth, and then we had presented our constitution to them. Then we taught the children, and then we taught the youth next. My interpreter there, his name is Paul. That makes that one easy. So we have Moses and Paul in the same church. We can't lose. But this is Paul, and I was fearful for him. He went through 4 services. We had 4 services that morning, and I said, okay, this is about the time I get a new interpreter. You know, I wear about 2 or 3 of them out per day. And he was so enthusiastic. He says, I would rather do nothing else. So we had the youth. We taught them, kind of introduced them to our program. Then that's a good picture of Moses is the guy right here on your right. And Kenny 1. We have 2 Kennys. So this is Kenny 1 on the left. They're the 2 that went out and decided to evangelize and to work in that area, and things just kind of came together for us. We're under a tent. It rained. It was interesting. I thought that'd be the end. They just scrunched in tighter. They weren't going to leave until things were finished. So just continue to pray, if you would, for this group. I only got the back of this guy's head, so that's not very helpful. But the fella in the suit, this fella right here, he's the one that has lent his land to have the church and to put the tent up and to have us there that day. All right, just a little more of the same. And of course, next was the adults. Then we went again to homestead visits. And this is the group at Kemenkuli. We're under duress for land. This is a real need for us. We need to be able to purchase some land to get them their own building on their own land. And so just continue to pray for that. It's hard to be patient on something like that when you have interested people, but you have no place to put them. So just continue to pray for that if you would, please. Okay, for a minute, switch over to Kenya for just a second. We went across the border. We had a little bit of a fall through. The guy that had the program that was supposed to take us over wasn't there. And that happens in Africa. Things break down. They're stuck. They can't get there. So that's a funny feeling to be crossing a border and not have a program in your hand. And so, but this young lady in the middle, her name is Elizabeth Otanio, and she is a bush shaker. She's not afraid to shake the bushes and see what falls out. And Pastor Felix got me, and he says, I have no program. So the communications had broken down, and you start thinking all those bad thoughts. Well, here I am in Kenya. I have nowhere to go, nobody to teach. This is terrible, you know. And then this young lady was in the motel. Hey, I got these young people over here in this church. Where you been? You know. So she had moved ahead and initiated, and that led to some other things that happened. The fellow on the left is Pastor Francis. I've taught him before when I was in Kenya. And he is interested in things continuing. And so the next day, it was more of, well, what is Heritage Bible Church and Missions? What is the premise of this mission? What are you all about? And so that kind of ended up into a pastor-teacher situation on the spot. So we were there about 3.5 hours, and we discussed doctrine. We discussed what expositional teaching is. We introduced the 10 questions of how to study the Bible. So basically, my role there was to introduce material, and then we're following up with it now. So just continue to pray for that. This is out in the middle of nowhere. There's a typical African church. Corrugated iron and posts and poles. No air conditioning, no heat. You take what comes, and boy, when it rains, you can't hear anything, so you just sing. You can't hear anything as the rain hits the corrugated iron. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, maybe an old barn or something. You can't hear. So those are some of the conditions that these folks live with. Okay, this is just a picture of everybody after, just to get an idea of who we were working with. It was interesting. This was a Friday afternoon, and a lot of these folks had to leave their businesses, had to leave their life, work, ways to make money as poor as they are, and they dedicated that time to be there to ask those questions. So it cost them something to be there, and you could tell. So they are interested, more than interested. They want the truth at all costs. So just continue to pray for our connection in Kenya. Okay, on the way back, I got waylaid. The guys, I will say, they schemed against me. But I wanted to get back to Kampala, okay, because we had a new start, beginnings of a new start in another area around Kampala. And they said, hey, Pastor, there's Pastor David is the spiritual advisor in a school, and they'd like you to come teach the kids. And I said, well, look, we didn't plan this, but if it's on the way, we'll do it. So, we're driving and driving and driving. Finally, we come to a three-way stop. It says 100 kilometers. I said, how is 100 kilometers on the way? And they said, well, Pastor, let's use an English word. It's just a little detour. So we made our detour. I'm glad we did. Just this last Sunday, the headmaster of the school had the kids ready again this Sunday morning, and we were able to teach them yet again. So we taught the young ones first, the juniors, and they pack them in. That's a good picture of the headmaster there on the left. Then we had the senior part of this school. It is a Christian school, and our pastor is the spiritual advisor there. So we have a real testimony and a real opening of ministry there. Then after, they wanted the teachers, and the headmaster wanted to have a class on some of the questions that they had, and it was more directed toward, well, we know how to teach academics. How do we teach the kids the Word of God as well so they'll fear God and walk with Him in their life? I felt like that was a tremendous question. So we were there a little while. So it was a good detour. 200 kilometers, but it was a good detour. These are some of the things we didn't plan on. And like I say, God has His plan, and He has His people prepared for what He wants to do. And so that's something I've had to learn over and over and over again as a missionary. It's not your field. You're not the Lord of the harvest. Jesus Christ is. He has His plan. And we need to be open to meet the need and be effective doing it. So if there's any foremost prayer, it's that God gives us the grace and humility to meet the need of the people, what God has planned. And hopefully we'll always be open to that. So continue to pray for that, and that is ongoing. Okay. We came back to Kiwumulo. I'm still working on these. Okay. I'm sorry I didn't follow this like I should have. The new work that I showed you with Moses 2 and Kenny, Bukaaba Namatumba. And I'll never say that again. You only get that one once. So continue to pray for them. There's Kamankuli. I showed you a picture of them. And on our way back, Kenny 2, you can put Kenny 2 in there. That's my fault. One of the young people needed a ride. He said, would you please give me a ride back? You got to go through Jinja, then over the Nile back to Kampala. And he said, Pastor, did you know that we have a prayer meeting from 9 to 12 every Saturday? And I'm teaching them the principles that you shipped over to us. Next time you come, could you stop there? I never knew about that ministry. So continue to pray for us the next year we go over, that we can solidly hit these places. Okay. Kiwumulo is where the forge is. The new forge has been relocated. And this is just the young people that I got a chance to teach. And then I had a delightful surprise. My old right arm came back, Diana, 6 months pregnant. And she couldn't stay out of it. And so she came and she was teaching the young people here. And so we had the old duo going on again. It was kind of fun. But just continue to pray. That is a brand new work. And just pray for the outreach. And once again, we were invited to another school. Again, something we had not planned on. And these kids were those that were studying for finals. And they decided to have us as their, I guess, entertainment, little break for them. And the assistant headmaster, David's a believer. We had a good chance to speak with him. And we were able to, again, have a program with these young people. Probably about 150 young people at this one. The one in Kamankuli was easily 200 young people. So just continue to pray as the gospel went out. And pray as God leads us. Okay, there's my old buddy. That is Pastor Obadiah. I didn't ask for it. He gave me his health records, and there's more wrong with him than right with him, I'm afraid. But he is at age 84, and he couldn't be more zealous and more enthusiastic. So continue to pray for him and his health. James is there at that church with him, and he is taking over the responsibilities of that, and he's also taking the responsibilities of our camps, both in Kenya and in Swaziland, Eswatini, and also in Uganda. So he's carrying a heavy load, and he is doing his best to keep up and keep the assignments going that were started. So just continue to pray for him. All right, that's early. This fills out later. That's just how it is in Africa. Okay, so we were after the service. We closed the service out. We're kind of behind the pulpit. Okay, where are we going to go? And during that service, a lady walks in, and I'd never seen her before, sits down, and then she saw us behind the pulpit, and she said, I got a place for you to go. Let's go to the university down the street. And so we've been trying to get in that university for years. And so I said, well, we can't just barge in, you just don't do that in that culture. She says, I'll have them ready for you. The headmaster and the supervising teacher are in the office waiting to talk to you. So this is James and I speaking with the headmaster, and while we're talking to him, the bell's ringing to bring the kids in. And so once again, we found ourselves in another school. Something, it was delightful to be there because we've been rejected for so many years, but the same thing happened. Pastors and missionaries have quit coming. And so that opened up the opportunity for us to give the gospel that Sunday afternoon. Okay, just the second half of that building. And like I said, the pictures are short and sweet because I had to cut them down or we'd be here for some time. That pretty much summarizes the work in Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo I left out. When I flew up to Uganda, Pastor Mondo, and this is a new experience. When you're teaching by way of technology, you may not know the people you're about to teach when you get there. I've never met this guy before personally. And so what happened is Dr. Karume couldn't come himself over to Uganda, so he sent Pastor Mondo, and we had about a 6-hour session with him. And it was an interesting time. I mean, he had a lot of good questions. He's the guy that summarizes in French when we're on the YouTube, or when our preaching time on Sunday ends up on the YouTube. He's the one that summarizes in French what's been taught. And so had a good chance to give him some materials and to just go over our Constitution, the ministry, the goals therein. So continue to pray for him. He wants to see the church progress. Pastor Karume, Dr. Karume, he's struggling with his eyes. And so you might want to continue to pray for that, and then trying to get the government to fund his job. So just a few things, a lot of things, right, to pray for. All right, does anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am. Okay, teams on the ground, well, as mentioned before, is communications. Communications is vital in anything you do. It is better to have someone communicating on the ground than to try to do it 8,500 to 10,000 miles away. They know the people, they live among them, they know what events are coming and going, and so their responsibility after studying prayer is to coordinate. And that's why it was so important to get teams together on this trip. And I'm in contact with them through WhatsApp and other apps throughout the week. So a lot of questions come in during the week, by the way, from some of the students off of the apps. That would be one, would be coordinating, translating, obviously. Also, they are continuing to help James and I continue the programs we started. So they're setting up, for example, groups on WhatsApp and on another application I don't quite understand yet, with, with Bessie Otonio. It's a Google something, I don't know what it is, but it works well. I really like it. Maybe one day I'll learn how to use it. But she invites me into her group, and so we do it that way. So they are continuing the program we started. So our tours are not an end in themselves. Okay, we kind of lay things down, get the information, then the follow-up comes when we come back here. Any other questions?
Schools, are they government schools?
The schools we asked, the last one was a government university in Mpiji, where James and Obadiah are. The other two were independent schools, and they were Christian schools. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do the people there view you and what your role is?
How do they view it?
How they view you and your role?
Okay, my role there is to mentor and instruct, administrate to a certain degree. I'm trying to work James in as a head administrator. Both James Manisi and Swaziland James Lukinji, between the three, Kenya, Uganda, Democratic Republic of Congo, I see Mondo taking over there. So I think they view me that way. But what I'm trying to do, and what I've been trying to do, is work myself out of a job. But every time that happens, they expand. So I would say that that's how they would view me. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your time, Pastor. I'll be handing it over to you at this point for prayer requests and announcements.